not many guys out there that walk the walk that are being able to tell their story like I am. And, you know,
You didn't become an informant.
Never become an informant, ever. And that's the first thing you learn when you're in that life growing up, and especially coming from Southeast, South Boston, and the largest Irish enclave in Boston. You're taught never to become a rat, ever. And everybody knows that growing up in Southie. Everyone.
How does the Italian mob compare to the Irish mob?
Well, they have the same thing. You never become a rat. You're not supposed to be a rat.
But a lot of guys have become rats.
It's unbelievable. There's more Italian rats in the mafia, or became rats, I should say. And who knows, maybe there's some CIs there now, confidential informants. For sure, I'm sure there is, still. And the reason why is because, yes, they were much more prevalent and bigger in the world and United States. Compared to the Irish, of course. But that said, you always take, like, you know, an oath of some type of, you know, of saying, I'll never rat. And everybody preaches that, including Whitey Bulger and Stevie Fleming. They preach, never be a rat. Meanwhile, they're a rat for 40 years with the FBI. Underneath their umbrella. Unbeknownst to a lot of people. And I know there's a lot of Monday quarterbacks out there, but that's exactly what they are, Monday quarterbacks. Because if they knew that Whitey and Stevie were really rats then, why didn't they say anything? Why didn't they come forward? Why didn't they do something about it? Good question, right?
Let's hear your story. So you grew up where?
I grew up in Southie. South Boston, largest Irish enclave in Boston. Tough Irish neighborhood. You had 3 major projects in that area. And they were all white. And growing up in the projects, you know, you had to be able to handle yourself. But growing up in Southie, you needed to be able to handle yourself.
What was your family like?
I had no father at home. My father was gone by the time I was, you know, a young boy. He was an alcoholic. My mother kicked him out of the house. Sounds like the typical Irish, you know, story, if you will. You know, he had the curse, as they say, unfortunately. But I never knew my father. I visited him maybe when I was a young boy, because all my sisters are older than me. And they knew him, my sisters did, but I didn't. And they used to bring me to where he lived once or twice when I was a baby, a young boy. But I vaguely remember him. But all I know is that he was a severe alcoholic. He had a disease.
How'd you get introduced to the...
So, you know, I was always like the little man of the house, you know, because I'm the only boy in the family. So yeah, I mean, I remember getting beat up when I was a kid. I was 5 years of age, and I got beat up by kids that were almost 10 years older than I. And it was down the street from where I lived. And they beat me up, put me in the gutter, spit on me, kicking me. And I finally get up, crying, enraged, ran home, told my sister about it. First thing I wanted to do is, even at that age, I was so enraged, and I knew they were bigger than me. I wanted to grab a knife and just start stabbing them. My sister grabbed me. She said, "Let's go." Went down the street. Their kid lived down the street, and they were there. the two of them. And my sister started beating the shit out of them for putting their hands on her little brother. And that said, one of them took off, the other one ran in the house, and there was a coat rack behind the door. And I think the Departed stole this from my story. Joking. Who knows? But she grabbed the coat rack and started beating him with the coat rack in his house. And she said, "You'll never put your hands on my little brother again." And she grabbed me by the hand after she was done. And she said, "You're going to the gym, and you're going to learn how to box, defend yourself." I'm like, "Yeah, okay, great, awesome." And I had a lot of energy as a kid. I was very hyperactive, nonstop. I remember my sisters always saying, anytime you were younger and we had to take you out, we always put a harness on you, because I would just take off, full of energy. And so when my sister brought me to the gym, I loved it. I loved it because I was able to fight someone that was my size. I wasn't overwhelmed by some kid that was 10 years older than me. I didn't know anything about boxing. I wasn't the best by any means, but I adapted to it like a fish to water. I got my ass kicked, but that didn't last long, because I found something that I loved, and that was boxing. And I started, every day I was in the gym, going to the gym, learning, training, listening, absorbing every bit I could about boxing. So I started fighting competition, and I started doing well. I became a junior champion. I became an open class champion a few years in a row. I never fought a novice fight as an amateur. I went from the juniors, because I had so much experience, right into the open class. I've grew up with a lot of good boxers that became champions. Mickey Ward, Vinny Pazienza. We fought on the same card in Atlantic City together. We trained all the time together. How many, five world championships he had, So I fought and trained with some really, really tough guys who gave their heart to that game. I was in that realm, but there was another realm on the side of me that was always enticing, because I came from nothing. My mother, she worked cleaning apartment buildings, people's homes, because she didn't have an education. She didn't have an education, and she had 4 children that she raised by herself. In those days, that wasn't an easy task, let alone today. So we never had it easy. So when I joined the gym, the local gym, started training there were guys that were associated with Whitey Bulger. He was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, Irish mob boss in the country. whether someone likes to hear that or they don't. That's the truth. Whitey was, in Southie, Whitey was like an icon. People looked up to him and they were afraid of him, extremely afraid of him. But they knew he had a lot of power. He had a lot of power. He could help people if he really wanted to. If they needed the help, he could do it. Whatever that help might be. But there was another side that they didn't know about him. He was an FBI informant for over 40 years. Me as a young kid, growing up around the guys that were associated with him, and a lot of them were guys from the gym who handled themselves. They worked out all the time, and they boxed and stuff like that. But they always had that side gig on the street where they always had plenty of money. Their pockets were full of cash all the time and drove beautiful cars. And I saw that. And I always wondered, how are they getting that? I found out eventually. And my first love was boxing. But that money, it was so enticing. I tried to stick with boxing as best I could. And maybe do a little, wheeling and dealing on the side. I ended up growing up in the projects, so the kids in the projects were always trying to make $1, and we'd be on the corner in the projects. There was a store, grocery store, if you will, meat store, Bell's Market, and the trucks would pull up, and they'd have cartons of cigarettes and stuff like that. As soon as the truck driver got out and they went into the store, we'd open up the back of that truck and start taking all those cartons of cigarettes out, if you will. And then we go back and resell them to the store for a lot cheaper than what he would have bought them for had he gotten it off the truck. So where there's a will, there's a way. And then I started, getting into selling marijuana a little bit, then started selling some cocaine. And most of the guys that I was around, that's where they were making their money, the cocaine. Now, there was always that myth that Whitey Bulger had nothing to do with drugs or anything like that. He liked to insulate himself. He didn't like to be around the guys that were the guys who were selling that, but yet because he was making a profit from it. He was very cunning, extremely cunning. Very intelligent. Very intelligent. Very well read. So I looked up to a lot of these guys when I was a young kid because I had no father at home, as I said. So they're either big brothers to me or they were like a father. And that was a bad thing for me. Because that was a weakness that I had. Because I was always looking for that, older brother or that father figure, if you will. And a lot of those guys knew that. They knew that. They took advantage of that. And they used that to their ability because they knew I was loyal and I wanted to prove myself as a kid. Biggest thing that growing up in Southie is you never became a rat. You would never rat out your friends or anyone else. That was a big, big thing. And anybody from Southie knows that. And if they say it's not true, it's bullshit. I started getting deeper with these guys. I was trying to do two things at the same time, boxing and selling drugs to support myself in the boxing game. Wasn't panning out. I had a few pro fights. My first pro fight was in California. Didn't know who I was fighting. I look across the ring and I see this guy. He's got a gold tee and he looks like the devil. Now, I had these gloves on at the time and they were like 8-ounce gloves. They weren't even 10-ounce. And at that time, you get to really wrap your hands like almost like a cast. And I said to myself, oh man, I'll kill somebody if I hit someone with these things on. Literally. I was, hold on. Somebody hits me with these, they'll kill me. I better be first. That's exactly what I did. I knocked that guy out in a minute and 37 seconds. And at that time in California, because there was so many Mexican fighters, that his is Irish kid. Red hair, blue eyes, you know, the shamrock on his trunks. They never see that. So after that first fight, they didn't even believe it was my first pro fight. They said, no, he's got to have more fights. He's got to have more fights. No, I don't. It didn't work out in California. I lost interest with the people that were handling me. And so I came back home. And then my attorney, Anthony Cardinelli at the time, who was represented mobsters throughout his career, Fat Tony Salerno, on the John Gotti case, just to name a few, major players in the game. And somebody says, like, the rat Arolata says, oh, what Tony Cardinelli ever win? He's lost every case there was with the... Of course he lost. They all knew they were going to lose. Because of guys like you who were with them that turned on them. Of course they know that. But they took their lumps and bumps. They went through it. They died in prison. So yeah, did Tony have this deck stacked against him? Yes, he did. There wasn't any lawyer on earth that was going to get him off unless they became a rat. So when I hear that, it bothers me. Because it's stupid talk. It is. And they know that. So Tony Cardinelli had an affection to boxing. His father was a trainer in New York. So he took it on himself to get involved in the boxing game. And he had a fighter that he was associated with who fought for the world championship in Madison Square Garden when it was still 15 rounds. Sean Mannion from Ireland. And he fought the body snatcher, Mike McCollum. So Tony had a lot of connections in the boxing world. He also knew the Duvers, who were big at the time in the 80s, Lou Duver and all that. So he called Lou Duva and he says, hey, I got an Irish kid here. I think you're going to really like him. He said, where is he? In Boston. He said, well, at the time he had Vinny Pazienza, Lou Duva. He said, send him down to Rhode Island with Vinny. So I went down with Vinny. He started training with Vinny. And so me and Vinny trained all the time, and then we fought on the same card in Atlantic City. I ended up winning that fight also. And then we went to Jersey where Lou Duva was based. And at this time, Lou Duva didn't have a contract with me. And I didn't show up at the gym one day because Vinny got cut sparring from another champion, Rocky Lockridge. We were doing round robins together. Me, Vinny, Rocky Lockridge and stuff. And Rocky used to lull you with the body shots and then throw that overhand right to catch you. You know, he tried to lull you and bang over the top. I knew that, so I was very cautious of that. He ended up catching Vinny and cutting Vinny in sparring. So Vinny couldn't spar. So I said, oh, all right. Well, Vinny's staying at the hotel. I might as well stay at the hotel too today. Have some fun. Lou Duva come over, started yelling at me. Where the hell were you? How come you're not at the gym? Blah, 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 blah. Started screaming at me. I didn't take kindly to that. I got my stuff and I left. I went back home to Boston. And I went back and I started getting heavier into the drugs. Selling a lot more cocaine. Because it was there for me, it was easy for me. I had the connections to do that. It was a path that I regret. Because boxing is my first love. But maybe hindsight looking back at that too, maybe it's best that I didn't do that either. Because unfortunately, a lot of these guys that I know, that I grew up with, that became great fighters, including Mickey Ward, they're having problems, you know, with the CTE in the brain, yep. And Mickey talks about it. I've talked to him about it. But a lot of fighters are like that. So maybe that was a blessing to me too. You never know what your path is going to be in life sometimes, right? If you have any type of, you know, maybe God-fearing person in yourself, maybe you just say, hey, you chalk it up to God's way of bringing you down that path in life. So I got heavier into the drugs. I got away from boxing. And I was dealing with Whitey's guys, that crew. And one day I said to myself, why am I buying the cocaine from them at this price? I had an opportunity to go to Florida at the age of 18 to buy kilos at much less a cost, and pure. And I had a pretty good business. At the time, it was mostly ounces and stuff like that, and grams or what. I did it all. Selling them into clubs and this and that. It was like a party weekend drug, if you will. I don't brag about that by any means, because I know a lot of people became drug addicts and are drug addicts. But at the same time, I always say, I never forced it down anybody's throat either. Everyone has a choice to make. Just like I made the choice to go to Florida and say, hey, I'm going to buy kilos and, and be an entrepreneur and a businessman on the street. And that's what I did. But I never forced anything down anyone's throat. Not that I'm justifying what I did by any means. But what I'm trying to say is we all have a say. I could say no all the time. No. And that goes for every side. So I started doing well. I had a BMW, I had a Rolex, and I was young. And Whitey's guys came by one day. They drove by. The head guy at the time, his name was Billy Shea. No relation to me. And as a matter of fact, they even came down to Atlantic City when I fought on the Vinny Pazienza card, and he bought me a bracelet that said, and if you win, I'm going to buy you a bracelet, a gold bracelet that says red. He had one that said Billy with diamonds. But he said, I'm not getting you the diamonds, but I'll get you the gold bracelet. You know I'm going to win that fight for sure, knowing that gold bracelet is waiting for me if I win. And he did. He followed through with that. He followed through. I got the bracelet. So one day he came by with his guys, drove by, saw me getting into my BMW, and he says, hey, Red, hey, how you doing? I'll be honest with you, I wasn't afraid of anybody, to be honest with you. I knew what I was doing could be a bit risky, if you will, because I'm stomping in their playground. So be it. He came by and he says, you don't get that much from us anymore. But you get a beautiful BMW, you got a Rolex on your arm. You're doing good. I said, I am. I said, I do not. I was straightforward. And that's one thing about me, and anybody that really knows me, they know I'm straightforward. I tell it like it is. And you can tell me like it is too. I appreciate that. I do. So I told him, no, I don't. I get something from you, but I don't get it all from you. What do you mean? I have my own connection in Florida. You do? And Billy Shea was a cunning guy, smart. He was educated in prison, college educated, smart, cunning himself. She said, And at the time, I didn't know their source wasn't that good. Really, Red? His mind was running immediately. Scheming already in his mind. I tell you what, Red. How much do you get a kilo for? Depends how much I buy. So we talked. He says, I tell you what, Red. Why don't you join us? And he talked about this when he testified against Whitey Bulger in federal court. He said, Red was a maverick. Those are the words he used. Red Shea was a maverick. Some people who are informants that I've gone against, talked against because they became informants, or even rats. They don't like that. They don't like me. But that's okay. I tell it like it is. And for me, it's like, I don't care what a rat has to say, ever. A rat could say anything about me, anything. It means nothing to me. It's like duck's feathers, water going off the duck. That's simple for me. I care nothing about a rat say, because their say is worth nothing to me. So they can say what they want, because the first thing about a rat is they love to project and deflect. That's the first thing they do. Oh, I think he's a rat. Oh, I think it. No. You're a rat, and stop projecting and stop deflecting. Accept it. Accept who you are. So Billy Shea, he testified against Whitey about recruiting me and bringing me in. He said Red Shea was a maverick, and quite frankly, he had the most powerful stuff around. Not that I'm bragging about that, but that's his words on the stand. So I get in with Billy and the crew. Well, Billy came to me and he says, listen, he's the boss for Whitey. He says, I want you to do something. He says, your customers you can keep. You don't have to add them into our customers. And you supply, and you'll make the money from it. That's a fucking no-brainer. Hello? I said, yeah, let's do it. So I became the main source for them, running from Boston to Florida, multiple kilos, monthly. Billy pulls me to the side because he liked me around him all the time because I could handle myself. If there was a problem or he got to go see somebody or want to see something, he'd call me, Red, I need you here now. I need you to go, all right, Bill, yeah, all right, I'll be there, no problem. I remember one night he called me because somebody was bothering his kids. We went down and I slapped the guys around for bothering his kids. And that's a fact. Okay. He says, I want you to do this. I want you to take some of that cocaine and I want you to sell it to your customers and give me a slice of it. I looked at him and went, well, I have to tell you, if you do that, you're going to weaken the cocaine product. And that could raise flags with all the other guys that are involved. He said, I don't give a fuck. I'm the boss. Mink. All right, you're the boss. So I went to my boxing trainer growing up, Tommy Connors. I said, Tommy, he wants me to, I don't know about that. I said, this could weaken the product. And he said, listen, he's going to throw you under the bus if anything happens. He said, but you're not the boss, are you? I said, no, I'm not the boss. He is. Well, if anybody ever questions, tell them to go see the boss. Plain and simple. I saw the play coming from a mile away, of course. So time went on. I took some of the product, I sold it to my customers, gave him a slice, weakened the product. Those guys came to me and they said, hey, this product's not the same, it's not that good, da-da-da-da-da. I went, am I the boss? No, but you bring the product up and you were the guy handling all the product and getting it all together like the chemist. I said, yes, I am. I said, you're gonna need to go see the boss and talk to the boss about it. They went to Whitey. They went to the big boss. Whitey says, I know that guy, and I know the kid. He said, the kid is only going to do what he's told. He's loyal. So Billy Shea was in Florida. He got a call that Whitey wanted to see him in Boston. I knew it was happening. So I said, fuck it. I'm taking off for the weekend. I'm going to Canada, as a matter of fact. I'm leaving the country. I don't know what's going to happen. Nor do I care, because he was trying to throw me under the bus. He's got some question in there to answer, just like I did. He needs to answer the questions, because he's the boss. Whitey told me he didn't believe him. As much money as he made for him, he didn't believe him. So Whitey told him, the only reason I'm not killing you is because you made me a lot of money. He told him to go back to Florida, and that was it. Now, mind you, when he got called up, he got off. I was in the airport going to Canada. He was coming up from Florida. We ran into each other in Logan Airport. Red! Hey, Bill, how you doing? I acted like I didn't know anything. He said, Whitey's calling me. You know why? I said, geez, I don't know why. I have no idea. You're going to have to go find out. So, after all was said, a few weeks went by. I was still running drugs. I got a call. Hey, Red, want to catch up with you. I want to talk to you. I want to show you something. Yeah, sure, no problem. I meet up. I want to show you something downstairs in the basement. Yeah, sure. I get on there. I was the first to walk down the stairs. I'll tell you, I learned the lesson. I was young. I learned the lesson. It'll never fucking happen again, I can tell you that. So I get on there. I turn around. What do you want to show me? And before you know it, holy behold, I get, whether it were Uzis, Mac-10s, whatever, it looked like an Uzi to me. Red, tell us about your friends, the guys you supply that are making money with you. Tell us about them. How much money they have? I'm in a basement with fucking Uzis on me. With a fucking natural born killer, if you will. I said, whatever they have, I gave them. It's me. I'm the guy. I stuck true to that Southie code. Never give your guy up. Never tell. I said, do what you gotta do. I was ready to take the bullet, or bullets. I had no fucking clue. I didn't know one day. Didn't know anything. Didn't know what was gonna happen. But I was ready to take it. All because of my word. The guns went down, and he said, "You passed. You passed. You passed the test. From now on, you're going to run the drugs." Man, I can't tell you how fucking mad I was. No, I'm serious. I can't even tell you how mad I was. I was relieved, but I was so fucking mad. All he had to do was ask me. I guess he wanted to see if I would rat on him. Or anybody. He got his answer. So I took over the drug business. I became the head guy. There were 52 people that got indicted at the time when we got indicted. 52. My name was at the very top. I was facing an A48 statute, federal statute, at a young age, in my early 20s. That statute carries 20, the minimum 20 to life. I was sent to prison in the beginning, waiting trial. And there were guys talking about, because there was a newspaper article, we got pulled in on a Friday. That Monday, an article come out saying, Whitey's a stool pigeon because he didn't get indicted with us. Whitey knew this was coming. He knew. The reason why he let Billy Shea go with no problem, because he knew this investigation was moving forward. The DEA, who was running the whole realm of it, they went to Washington, and they told the FBI in Washington, a guy named, I believe it was Potts, number 2 in control, the same guy who was in charge of Ruby Ridge at the time, FBI agent. The DEA said, we're going to investigate these Irish guys for drugs. They said, oh, okay, tell them the story. So after they're done meeting, the DEA and the FBI in charge, number 2, he turns to his guy. He said, the guys that they're talking about in Boston, aren't those our guys? Aren't those our informants? And he said, yeah, it is. He said, call Boston immediately and let them know that there's not much we can do. We'll do as best we can to be careful. So they had an FBI agent there in Boston who grew up in the projects in Southie like me, John Connolly. And he was protecting Whitey all those years and letting Whitey know when there was a bug somewhere by the DEA to be careful and not to talk. So Whitey knew this investigation was happening. He knew that he needed a sacrificial lamb to take the heat off him. And who better than the young kid that had the fucking most balls? I got very lucky. I got very lucky for a few reasons. When you live that life, anything can happen. You'd be killed, shot, stabbed. because you're dealing with a lot of shit. Or you could end up doing many, many years in prison. But it was a choice I made. Whether I was influenced as a young boy or not, I made that choice. And Whitey was such a great, conniving son of a gun. When I was waiting trial, he sent a message to me and he says, make sure you tell Red that it takes a strong person to reach inside themselves and say, I'm here because of me. And in the philosophical part of it, he's right. He's right. We all have a choice to make. We can say no. Well, I didn't. I accepted full responsibility. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know Whitey was a rat. When it came out that, word of it that he could be, I still protected him. Because he still had my ear while I was in prison. And what he said was, the feds can't get me. So what they're going to do is try to take down my reputation, my character, and who I am. So people will roll. I believed that. I believed it. So I protected him at all times. Even in prison, when someone said, bad-mouthed him or whatever, I said, you're out of line. So all of a sudden, eventually, they had more investigations and grand juries against Whitey through the DEA, not the FBI, and ended up indicting him and others. Whitey took off. The other guys got caught. Whitey was on the run for 16 years in the hometown of Santa Monica, right? I have a friend, Ken Koken. He lives down near the hotel Casa del Mar. And I visit him. We'd go out and we'd walk down the street and we'd walk down towards 3rd Ave to the plaza to go to Starbucks or whatever. Unbeknownst to me, I walked by his house a few times with Ken. Could you imagine what a small world it is? Could you imagine if I ran into that son of a bitch at the time? So I always thought about it if I did run into him. I always knew what I would do. I knew what I would do. I always had this dream, and it recurred over the years. And who knows what dreams, right? Seriously. You never know. You're like, oh, what's this type of dream? How come? And I remember walking in the streets of New York. And there's Whitey. I pulled him into a doorway, into a building, and said, grabbed him quick and pulled him in. Whitey he was physical, but he was he wasn't me, physically. And I said to him, why? I asked him why. Why would you become a rat? Why would you sell me out when I had your back all these years? And he said to me, I was only trying to protect you. In a dream, I'm like, what's this supposed to mean? But when he said that to me, I looked at him like he had two heads. And I grab him by his chin and the back of his head, and I snap it. And I left him there. So as time went on, I always said, and this is a fact, my attorney had to call the U.S. attorney because they had my name on the list to testify against Whitey Bulger. I said, it'll never happen. I'll never rat on a Martian, let alone Whitey Bulger. So he talked to the attorney, Tony Cardinelli did, and the U.S. attorney. He said, you don't know what Red Shea's going to say. You got enough guys who are going to cooperate for you and do the job for you, which they did. He said, you don't want him to throw a wrench into your wheels. You never know with Red. Of course, I wasn't going to testify anyway. I would have taken contempt of court. I wasn't going on any stand and testifying against anyone. Even if he's a rat. Even if he gave me up. I'm not going to testify. Just because he's a rat doesn't mean I'm going to be a rat. As a matter of fact, my attorney asked me 5 years prior of me being released, after Whitey was caught, he said, I got a phone call. He said, I know what the answer is going to be, but I have to ask you anyway. You have a chance to come home now if you want to testify. The answer was simple. I said, I walked in a man, I'm going to walk out a man. I'll continue to do my time. To a lot of people, they find that maybe, oh, you're stupid or this or that. Say what you want. I don't find it stupid. And there were a lot of good men and women that are doing time and never ratted and never would rat. And I respect them for that immensely. Because there's a code, and they're living by it, and they're honoring that code. And I wouldn't do it. Wouldn't do it. I walked in a man, I'm going to walk out a man, as I said. But time goes on. Time goes on. And, you know, I look back now, hindsight and all that I've been through and everything. I've hurt a lot of people. I know I have. But a lot of people have hurt me too. But if there's anything that I can say now, is that I hope someone can learn from my mistakes. You know, there's no rhyme or reason.
You're one of the few stand-up guys that didn't.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, there's not many of us out there. There's not many of us stand-up guys out there. And that's why I take the platform now. And that's why I don't want to say I'm an advocate, because I'm not an advocate for anybody unless they ask me to be, and they're solid. If they're solid people and they ask me to help them, I'm there, 100%. And anybody that knows me knows that. Anybody that knows me and you're a solid guy and you need help, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. You call me. It's funny because my wife is like, you know, your phone is on at 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning, and it goes off sometimes. I say, yeah, I know that. I said, you know why that phone's on? In case a friend ever needs me.
All right, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
When I was designing the first Soft White Underbelly book, I realized that there were so many great portraits that weren't going to make it into that book. They just wouldn't fit. And once I saw how well that first book sold, I knew I'd have to design a second book. This second book is finally ready to ship. Like the first one, this book has a collection of some of the best portraits from Soft White Underbelly, accompanied by a quote from that person's interview. This book features another group of Rebecca portraits, as well as a collection of color images of the Whitaker family, and plenty of others. You can order yours for $125 or $150 for a signed copy at softwhiteunderbelly.org. Again, like the first book, once this book is sold out, I will not be printing more of them. The portraits are what Soft White Underbelly is all about, and these two books contain the best of all that work. Thank you for watching.